Hi, this video will be to show a method to use to keep your quilt straight on the rails, to keep your quilt top in the same spot as you advance it. There's numerous ways, so this is just a way. It's not the way. It's a way to not have to go around back and flip your channel locks if they're on the back there. So where we're going to start at is we are in the quilting interface. So the design has already been created and I'm actually in beginnings right now. This will work whether you have beginnings or pro. So I wanted to just go ahead and use beginnings so everyone would know it works for them, but it doesn't matter if you have beginnings or pro. So the quilt top's already loaded. I've got the batting and the top. They're basted down at the top. I haven't done the sides yet because I wanted to make this video and it was easier to not have it basted yet. So right now, before I even get started, this is what I'm gonna do. Um, and I just want to say that when I set the total width back in the panel stacker screen, I used my foot just with the edge of my foot at the raw edge of the quilt top. So I'll be using that same distance for what I'm about to do. So that was setting the total width. Okay, so right now I'm going to go into plugins. It's a choice up there in the top right. And with beginnings, you only have marking tool. You have some other choices with pro, but you do have marking tool with beginning. So I'm going to tap that. So this changes me to the marking tool screen. And by default, I already have a number 1. Nothing is set yet, but I have a number 1. So I'm going to move my needle to the very top here, and I've got my foot at the edge, just like I did in the panel stacker screen, and I'm going to say add, and that adds a little brown dot up there. So now I'm going to move, I'm just moving it as easy as I can, and I'm going to say add again, and it did a straight line. If you just pull it gently toward you, it pretty much is a straight line. So now I want to do the same thing on the far right, and I'm pushing my machine back, and the edge of the foot is at the edge there, and I want to say add marking there. So add marking, and I'm going to say right. So enter. And now that right is selected, and I'm going to say add, and I'm just have my fingers, I'm just gently pulling it straight toward me. I'm going to say add again, and I have another straight line. If you can tell if it's, I'm going to say remove last, and if you see that it's kind of jagged there, you know you need to redo it. So I'm going to say remove last, and I'm going to do this back over because you definitely want a straight line. Pull it toward me and say add. So now I have another straight line. And a lot of quilts you're able to tell what the center is, so it'd just be nice to have a center line. So I already know that that's the center right there. So I'm going to put my needle so it's right at that center. And I'm going to say add marking, and we're going to say center. So enter that. And I'm going to say add. And again, I'm just going to pull it gently straight toward me and say add. So now, as I advance my quilt, I know exactly where the center is. So that's a great thing. If your quilt has a horizontal seam, then you could also do a line for that, just to check it. So I'm going to say add marking, and just abbreviate HOR, enter, add, and then I'm really not trying to keep my machine straight at this point because I want to come over here and put my needle above the seam. And the 21 Pro has what's called a needle jog. So I'm able to put my needle right even down in it. You can tell I was a little off. And so now I'm going to say add again. So now I have a straight line there. So if that had not been a straight line, Like if we'll just say remove last. So let's just say that was where I added it. I can tell it's slanting up, and already I don't have my quilt straight. So that's just a quick way right there while you're in this screen to test, do I have this? So you could stay in this screen and make sure you had that horizontal seam truly horizontal to the rails, just by being in this screen. So we know we've got our two edges now, so we're going to say okay. And these brown lines will stay there. They actually stay there until you physically go in the marking tool and say remove all, or remove, you can arrow and select to remove. So that's just really nice that I know exactly where my edges should be for the duration of this quilt. So we'll say okay and go back in this screen. So if I were getting ready to quilt, then I would be moving my needle. I have the center selection selected in Zone Manager. So I would move my needle where the center is and tap there. And what I'm hoping for at this point is that my design is centered between those lines, and it's actually a tiny bit to the left there. So maybe I didn't have it just exactly right. So I can retap and reposition if I want to. Ah, I moved it up too high. Okay. So this is a tiny fraction off to the right, but I'm going to not worry about it. So at this point, I would quilt, and I would finish. I would pull my bobbin, and I would get the zone marking spot for the next zone. So we're going to just pretend I've done all that, and I'm going to push my machine back, and I'm going to advance the quilt. So I would advance it to wherever the next spot for the next zone is. And I'm trying to be a little sloppy here, maybe. So I know that that's the center, but I would be going for my center spot, and I would touch that. And I would hope that my design is there. So, and then again, if I wanted to do an exact check on the edges, then I could move my needle. I could move my needle, say, bring it all the way forward even, and have it there, and go into plugins and marking tool, and then I could say add marking, and I could just say edge, and say enter, and then say add, and then I'm looking, and my little brown dot is right there on that brown line, so I know that it's still square. And then I could come over here and do the same, and I could say remove last because I want to take that dot away over there, and say add, and there's that little brown dot. You can barely see it. So that's another quick way to just check, are these edges truly where you want them to be. And then the I would arrow up to that horizontal, and I would say remove selected. Yeah, I want to do that. And then I could do the same again. I could say add marking, and enter, and add, and then take my machine over here and do another add, and then I can verify is the line that I just made, is that truly equal? And if it's not, if it's not truly lined up for this design, or I can tell, like I showed earlier, if I say remove last, and I kind of shifted up a little bit, like I can tell, oh, I don't have my quilt straight on the rails. So then I would need to smooth around until until I could get it to where I can say add, and yes, it is still straight. So that's another way. And just to add this in, what if in my getting the quilt straight on the rails, I ended up with something like that? Then because sometimes that happens, and you're like, oh no, if this is where it takes to make it straight, what am I going to do? So that's very, very easy. You would spray it with starch. This is just any starch. So you would spray, spray, spray right there. And then you would take a hot iron. I have the Panasonic cordless iron. And just let the starch set for a few seconds. You don't have to immediately do this, but take a little break there, and then come back and do your hot iron and do that. And if it's still got a little fullness in it, then just get you some water and spray it, and then do this again. And before you know it, it will just lay right down flat. So I learned that from Kelly Klein, so I'm thankful to her for that. So that's just a way, if you do end up with some fullness, how to get rid of it. And then when you're at the end of your quilt, then you could use, let me go ahead and advance my quilt. And obviously I've been uber sloppy here. But when you get to the bottom, again, you want to know, do I have my quilt still square on the rails? So you could come back in here, and we're going to remove the horizontal. Okay, so I removed that. And now I could add marking, and I could say bottom and enter. And then here I could say add, and then move it on over here and say add. And I could be adding other points along the way if I wanted to. And then I can look and see, is this still straight? And it's not. You can see that going by that little design and that little design, that this needs to be down a little. So I could try to work it. So I could say remove last, and then do another test and say add, and do I have it straight yet? And now you can see that looks really straight. So I would know, yes, my bottom is straight. But like I said, you don't have to go all the way. You could even start here. If you see it's kind of wonky, then add more lines. And then as you add a line, that would be another way of telling if it's bowing, because it could be that the ends are where they need to be, but maybe it's bowed up. Sometimes with your quilting, it'll tend to pull up, and you can catch that this way by doing your adds. I'm going to make it obvious. So if you see something like that starting to happen, you're going to be like, uh-oh, uh-oh. And maybe you're able to shift that middle part down, or it may be that you need to kind of shift this up and take some fullness out. So, you got to do what you got to do to try and get that bottom as straight as you can if it's not straight. So, then when you're done, you just say remove all. Are you sure? Yes, because now you're done with your quilt. So you say remove all. Okay. And so that's a way that I have found to be very useful in making sure that my quilt, I've always placed it so that the design is right there, and I can keep monitoring. When I had that center line, I can keep making sure that center line is in the center. So I hope that you found this helpful, and who knows, maybe we'll find some more ways to use the marking tool to keep us straight.